All right, good morning. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure. We are here to talk about a very important issue, a battle that we have been fighting for many years to stop this disastrous AB5 policy. And now that threat has gone national as we've seen this new rule being promulgated and pushed out of the Biden administration. So to start off this morning, I want to invite up my very good friend we've been fighting on this issue from day one. He has been the spearhead of this fight here in California and now in Congress, Congressman Kevin Kiley.
All right, thank you, Leader Gallagher. Thanks for allowing the rain to stop for today's press conference. I knew when I left here we were in good hands with James Gallagher being the Republican leader, and yet another example of that. But we are here today to warn against the nationalization of one of the worst laws that has ever been passed in California. That is California's notorious, infamous AB5 law, which has devastated the livelihoods of folks in over 600 professions in California, and that, according to a study that just came out, has led to a 10.5% decline in self-employment in California and a 4.4% decline in overall employment. Now, some of our friends with us today will remember we actually held a similar press conference a little less than a year ago with a similar purpose, to warn against a problem that California had going national. And in that case, of course, it was the elevation of California's former Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, to national office. We warned about Julie Su's tenure in California, what a disaster it had been for the EDD, which we're right outside of, and indeed the way in which she had ruthlessly enforced AB5 as the architect of that law. Now, it's important to note we were successful in our purpose that day, that is, stopping Julie Su from being confirmed by the United States Senate. After a record number of days last year of not confirming her, of bipartisan opposition, the Senate returned her nomination to the White House. Now, as a side note, this White House has decided that Senate confirmation is now optional for cabinet officers, and so Julie Su remains in a sort of dubious position as the permanent acting Secretary of Labor. But we won that battle. We were able to effectively show what her leadership at the Department of Labor here meant to California, and when the United States Senate and folks across the country got a glimpse of that, they said, no, thank you. And so that is our purpose here today as well. Because now we have not a particular person, but a policy that is going to spread from California to the rest of the country. And we have known that this day was coming. President Biden, when he was running for president, he said that California's AB5 was his model for labor relations across the country. Shortly after he took office, they tried to get it done in Congress with the PRO Act, which had an identical version of the ABC test found in California's AB5. They didn't manage to get that out of the Senate, and so they then moved on to simply getting this done by executive decree, by a new Department of Labor independent contractor rule, which was just announced a couple weeks ago, and which is very clearly designed to imitate AB5 as much as possible and will have similarly disastrous effects. And the way we know that for sure is, again, of all of the people that President Biden could have chosen to be his Secretary of Labor, we're a country of over 300 million people. Who does he choose but the very architect of AB5 itself to enforce his new independent contractor rule? It's estimated by the Chamber of Progress that between 3.2 and 3.8 million independent contracting jobs will be lost if and when this rule takes effect. So here's how we are fighting against it. Number one, we are making sure that everyone understands what independent contractors, freelancers, folks who work in the gig economy in California have been through. We can give you testimonials from people in all of those 600 professions, many of whom lost everything because of AB5. To fight back against it, I am going to be introducing, as soon as this new rule is transmitted to Congress, which will be any day now, legislation under the Congressional Review Act. What does this mean? It means that Congress has a special authority to fast-track legislation that will nullify a new rule that has been promulgated by an executive agency. So we are building a broad coalition to reverse that regulation. There are also now 2 lawsuits that have been filed against it, one challenging the procedure by which it was enacted, one challenging it on constitutional grounds. But when I think about what is at stake for our country right now, I think about a comment that Julie Su made back when she was here in California as our labor secretary in 2019 after AB5 was signed by Gavin Newsom. And she was talking about what she was going to do to enforce it. She said, we're going to do audits. We're going to go in. We're going to exact fines and penalties. And she said, we're going to force people to comply. And if they don't, they'll just have to understand that's not the kind of economy that we want in California. Not the kind of economy we want in California, where folks have the ability to pursue the American dream, to work on their own terms. And what kind of economy do we have now in California, by the way? It was just announced that the unemployment rate has risen to 5.1%. That's the second worst in the entire country. Wage growth in California is rock bottom in the entire country. Our GDP is stagnating. Our economy here is not in good shape, and that is what the policies of California and of Julie Su will do to the rest of the country, AB5 being foremost among them. And this is a time when our country simply cannot afford that. Americans are struggling right now, have very pessimistic views about our economy, about what the future holds for our economy. Our workforce still faces substantial challenges. Folks are still being crushed by inflation. The absolute last thing we need is to take a sledgehammer to our national workforce and economy with a national version of AB5. So I am very grateful to have Leader Gallagher and Assemblywoman Sanchez and Assemblywoman Dixon and other members of the legislature here who know better than anyone how devastating AB5 has been and how devastating a national version of it would be for the country. And I want to thank them for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Congressman. And, as Kevin just said, we are now at 5% unemployment here in California. People are losing jobs. And now, because of Biden's policies also, they are facing record inflation that we haven't seen in a generation. And people are struggling in this state. It's getting harder and harder to pay the bills, to pay the utility bill, to pay your gas bill, to pay your rent. Tougher and tougher in this state because of the policies that are coming out of this building in Sacramento and now on the national level under the Biden administration, taking this terrible policy that, as was said, has robbed people of their livelihoods, of jobs that they loved. And this needs to be emphasized. These were jobs that people wanted to do. They wanted to work as independent contractors. They didn't feel like their rights were being violated. They loved these jobs, acting as a freelancer, whether it was in journalism or in the entertainment industry or as a gig worker. These were jobs that people loved, and they were taken from them by this policy. And now, to add insult to injury, they're talking about taking this policy across this nation and beginning the stages with these rules, with these regulations, to do the very same thing to all Americans. It's wrong, and it needs to stop. And add on to that, now we have someone who has not even been appointed, who was stopped, who did not get Senate confirmation, and yet is still in this place of power to promulgate such rules. It's wrong. It's a violation of the very principles of our republic. And so it's important that we stand up. So we are standing up on the national level. Congressman Kiley with the work he is going to do under congressional review. And here in the state of California, we are continuing the fight. As Republicans in the legislature, we will be introducing legislation to repeal AB5 and fight these policies. Why are we doing this? We're doing this for the everyday Californian. The everyday Californian who has been taxed enough, who has been burdened enough, and who has seen their rights violated, and who right now need some relief. They need relief from these burdensome regulations. They need relief from these taxes. They need relief from these utility bills that are skyrocketing. Now another increase coming down the road. It needs to stop, and we need to fight as policymakers, as legislators, on their behalf. That's why we're here. Not to embolden the bureaucrats, to empower them, to give them more power to burden everyday Californians, but to actually fight for the everyday working Californian. And we're going to continue that work. And so now I'd like to invite up my colleague, a new assembly member here in Sacramento, fighting on behalf of Orange County and Riverside counties, Assemblywoman Kate Sanchez.
Good morning. Today I am announcing legislation that will completely repeal AB5 and restore the tens of thousands of jobs that it has destroyed. AB5 has been bad for workers, bad for our local economies, and bad for California as a whole. There are few things more representative of the American dream than starting your own business or working for yourself. For far too many Californians, that dream was ripped away by the implementation of AB5. So many working moms like myself, who are also raising kids, managing households, were devastated by the effects that AB5 had because they lost access to hundreds of flexible professions. I have been told by many of these women they had lost their livelihoods as bookkeepers, artists, family caregivers, designers, and hairstylists because of this destructive law. It is time to end the madness and help restore the American dream here in California by repealing AB5. Thank you.
Okay, well, now we are going to invite up a man who has spoken several times on the devastation of this policy, who was a victim of it himself, Tom Manzo.
First off, I would like to thank Congressman Kiley and Assemblymember Gallagher, Sanchez, for inviting me and allowing me to be part of this event. I also want to thank and respect all the members of our trade organization, the California Business and Industrial Alliance. It's an honor to represent you at events like this. So, Biden administration's department unveiled a new final rule on independent contractors, threatens to disrupt livelihoods of millions of freelancers throughout the country. Does it sound familiar? It certainly does. Inspired by California's own disastrous law known as AB5, it's going to make it much more difficult on independent contractors. Instead, it's going to favor reclassification of countless workers as full-time employees with little to no say from the actual freelancers. So there's three really important points that we need to talk about. One is this new rule is going to limit contractual freedom and economic flexibility. So Department of Labor's rule under Julie Su is going to significantly restrict the freedom of private entities to engage with contracts with employees and how they want to decide to utilize these employees. So this is another overreach by government authority that's going to cause problems within our economy. Second, it's inefficiency and overcomplexity to the classification. So now California is famous for the ABC test. Nationally, you're going to have a 6-factor test introduced by the new rule. So it's going to complicate the process of classifying workers. It's going to be so difficult for businesses to figure out how to classify these employees, it's going to lead to legal ambiguity, which means more lawsuits. So this is an opportunity now for lawyers to sue more small businesses because they didn't understand how they should classify a particular employee. And the third, which is the worst of all of this, and glad why on a national scale we're fighting it, is it bypassed all legislative authority and democratic accountability. So the rules formulated and enacted through an administrative process. So this circumvents the traditional legislative pathway. So again, another overreach of executive power, and it's lacking the direct accountability to the electorate, to the voters, who's us. So what are the consequences of this rule? What are people saying right now? Studies are suggesting that 30% increase in a small, medium-sized, large business, because now, instead of an independent contractor, they become an employee. How many people is this going to affect? Studies suggest 3.4 million independent contractors could have to become employees. So the issue that California has, and now the nation is mirroring, is it's this one-size-fits-all approach. Well, it doesn't work. You know, what works for somebody that drives an Uber and somebody that's a translator or somebody that's a hairdresser, they shouldn't have that same set of rules and regulations. So the Department of Labor's final rule for independent contractors, it's a misguided solution. And we have to do something about it. We have to speak up, and we have to do what we can to make our voices heard. It is time that we have a voice, and that's why I represent the thousands and thousands of companies and employees and employers within the state of California. We've had enough.
Thank you so much, Tom. And last, we have Matthew Espinoza with us from the Associated Builders and Contractors.
Good morning. Representative Kiley, Leader Gallagher, and Assemblymember Sanchez, thank you for having me today. My name is Matthew Espinoza, and I am the Director of Government Affairs and Community Engagement with the Associated Builders and Contractors Northern California chapter. ABC is a national construction industry trade association with 68 chapters representing more than 22,000 member companies. As one of those 68 chapters, ABC NorCal was founded in 1976 and is located in Livermore, California. ABC NorCal represents nearly 500 large and small companies across Northern California and upskills more than 300 construction apprentices per year. President Joe Biden's Department of Labor, under the direction of Acting Secretary Julie Su, is moving forward with a final rule that creates an ambiguous, difficult-to-interpret standard for determining independent contractor status. California's AB5, which is very similar to the Department of Labor's final rule, has had a negative impact on worker opportunities, according to a new paper from the Mercatus Center from the George Mason University. The paper's authors estimate that self-employment in California fell by 10.5% on average, while overall employment fell by 4.4% on average. California's rates before and after the implementation of AB5 to other states with less stringent worker classification rules. So instead of promoting much-needed economic growth and protecting legitimate independent contractors, the Department of Labor has moved forward with a final rule that will result in more confusion and expensive, time-consuming, unnecessary, and often frivolous litigation, as both employers and workers will not understand who qualifies as an independent contractor. Regrettably, the confusion and uncertainty resulting from the final rule will cause workers who have long been properly classified as independent contractors in the construction industry to lose opportunities for work. Legitimate independent contractors are a vital part of the construction industry, providing specialized skills, entrepreneurial opportunities, and stability during fluctuations of work common in the industry. They play an important role for large and small contractors, delivering construction products safely, on time, and on budget. The ability of construction firms to continue the industry's long-standing practice of utilizing legitimate independent contractors. The Department of Labor's final rule should be withdrawn or nullified to ensure AB5's unfortunate workforce consequences are not repeated throughout the country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for coming, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the media may have at this point.